Greetings, everyone. This is Chester Spellman, Director of AmeriCorps State National. We appreciate you all participating in today's webinar. So in terms of the agenda, I wanted to provide a few opening comments, and then we have a number of my colleagues from here at CNCS to provide some updates. And then at the end of today's call, today's webinar, we will be happy to answer any questions that you have. So we're really excited about the opportunity today to continue the conversation about the PSA Match program. I think we have a lot of exciting updates to provide. One of the things we're going to be sharing a little later on in the call is providing an update regarding the success of the campaign so far. The Be the Greater Good PSA has been a highly successful PSA. We're really excited about continuing the partnership with all of you and seeing the PSA aired in your local media markets and seeing that increased. I spent a good bit of time with all of you at the regional trainings across the country this year, and one of the items that a number of our commission colleagues requested is a follow-up webinar answering questions and providing additional updates on the PSA Match program. So we're thrilled that we've been able to reschedule this. I know that the last time, a couple of months ago, that we attempted to have this conversation, that there were some technological issues. So we have a new platform that we are hosting today's webinar on, and we're confident everything's going to work out today. But we really appreciate you participating and look forward to just all the information that's going to be shared and answering any questions that you have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann Vinsel, who is the Director of Creative Services here at CNCS in the Office of External Affairs. Ann.
Hi, everyone. We're so glad that you guys had a chance to spend some time with us on the outreach campaign and just going over some of the tools and tips that we have for you guys to be really successful with your outreach. As we all know, and as Chester alluded to, the PSA Match program is really a win-win for all of us. Obviously, it provides you guys with an opportunity to get some match, but it also, overall, for all of us, increases awareness and recruitment for AmeriCorps. And know that your efforts at the local level really, really help to make this campaign even more successful. So I did want to kind of bring everybody back to the beginning and remind everyone a little bit about when this whole process started. So after we created our PSA, we packaged it and sent it out to 1,200 television stations across the country in the first week of March for 2019. So what the TV stations actually received is they received a DVD box. It had a PSA letter in it with content explaining what the PSA was all about and why they should air it. And from there, we also set up this monitoring site, which is what we'll be going through today and showing you sort of the elements of it and the tools that will be useful to you all. But before I kind of go into the website with you guys, I did want to introduce Keith Hempel. He is the president of TV Access, and TV Access is a company that works on sending PSAs out to television stations across the country. They partner with a lot of other government organizations and nonprofits to really get the word out. And I thought, Keith, that maybe you could provide some background for everybody, explain to our commissions how sort of the PSAs are tracked and also, sort of the technology behind it, and also how television stations, how do they select their PSA? How do they figure out how it's going to be played on air? So, Keith, are you able to kind of give us a little bit of that background?
I'd be happy to. Once again, I want to thank everybody for spending the time with us. The first question Ann wanted me to deal with was how are PSAs tracked? What we do is we subcontract with Nielsen Media Research Services, same people that do the Nielsen ratings. And what we do is we put a code that you can't hear or see on the PSAs before they go to the station, and then Nielsen's black boxes electronically pick up that code when it plays and stores that information, and once a week they download it to us, and that's what we use to create the information that's in your website. So you can't see or hear it, but it's there, and it's kind of like a beacon telling Nielsen that this airing belongs to us. Nielsen supplies me with the station that played it, the date, the time, the version that they played, and what program it was part of. So kind of some decent raw information. And then we also take that and add in, through other Nielsen programs, dollar values and audience impressions, so you get a better idea of the success of your program. The second part she wanted me to address is how do stations select PSAs? The stations are still under FCC requirements to play PSAs, or actually 90% of the stations are still under requirements. So they do have to fill out a form and submit it once a month to FCC, and the penalty for falling behind or being brought up on not doing it is actually as severe as losing their station license or putting them out of business. So stations take it very seriously. They very much have built PSAs into their overall business plan, and typically they have one or more persons at the stations to decide which ones to play. That person used to be called the Public Service Director, and if you're ever stuck for a title, that's always the safest one. Not that many people still use that as their active title, but if you talk to a station, they will know exactly who that should go to if you call the title the Public Service Director. And then how do they decide? They're looking for messaging that matches their overall station identity. And so AmeriCorps and volunteering is definitely part of almost every station's identity. They don't want to offend or upset a viewer and cause them to change the channel, but once again, your creative has that covered without any problems. I think that answers the questions for that first round.
Thank you, Keith. I think it's really helpful just to have a little bit of background on PSAs and television stations and how they work. And I think I wanted to make sure you guys are all seeing the screen. The URL for the monitoring site is up there. It's cncs-americorps.com. And this is the website we're going to kind of go through today to show you. We're going to go through how you should really get started on outreach. And I know some of you are already deep into outreach, but some of you that might not have started tackling it, I thought we could just sort of go through a step-by-step kind of program to get you started. So I think the first thing you should do when you get to the site is you're going to go to the Localized PSAs button right here, and you're going to click Media Reports and Information. And we should be seeing a list of all the states that are participating in the match program. And let's, for fun, just select, let's go to Alabama. And you're going to open that link. And this is what a typical state monitoring site will look like. So the first thing that I would do would be to go down to the TV receiving list. And this is going to be an Excel spreadsheet, which we'll download. And it might take us a little while. Oh, here it is. Let's see if we can get this open. Okay. So when you open this, you guys are going to see a list of every single television station that received the PSA in the state of Alabama. And let's see, we will get out of this. You'll see like their email addresses and everything else. So that's really your roadmap to who received your PSA and their contact information. So once you've kind of looked at that, I did want to mention one thing to you. If you see that a television station did not receive it, but you have a relationship or you know of a television station and they needed to have the PSA in a different format than what they received, you can go to the Download PSAs button, and if you click on that, you're going to see that there is the PSA in different formats. It's at different lengths. We know some television stations will say, oh, I have time to run a whole 60-second. Some will say, I can run a 15-second. They need to be able to have that flexibility to choose lengths to fit in with what their programming schedule is. Just want to make sure you guys are aware that that button does exist. So anyway, now you know what you have every format available that you might need. You have your receiving list. And then the next thing is to really do a little bit of your research before you start connecting with the station. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to show you guys the FAQ page. Now when we get here, you'll see that there's two FAQs. One is going to be more FAQs for the PSA match, which Bonnie will be reviewing with you guys in a little while. But the one that I want to show you here is overcoming objections. So this is really your roadmap to understanding how to talk to the stations and I'm sorry, you guys. So we're going to look at, first thing I would do is make sure, obviously, that you've seen the PSA. I'm sure most of you have already watched it, but if you haven't, make sure that you watch the PSA yourself so you're familiar with it. And then I would take a look at the sample script here, which is telling you, to introduce yourself, to explain a little bit why it's important to air this PSA. And then really the most important thing, I think, to really sell it to our program directors at the television stations is to tell them what your AmeriCorps programs are doing locally. That's what they're going to care about. So if you have a great AmeriCorps program that's doing something in your location, I would share a little bit of a snapshot of what they're doing. The other thing is this is a great opportunity to build relationships with television stations. I know a lot of times we're trying to get press for all of our great work, and they can start knowing who you are and knowing what you're doing. It'll just be even better as you go down the road for future events and getting recognition from the press for that angle. So I just encourage you all to take a look at this FAQ document. The other part of it is if you do start getting objections, which you will, from some of this is really, we went through with Keith and we kind of pulled out the major objections that we hear all the time when we're pitching the PSA, and then we kind of give you some pointers on how to talk about it. So I would make sure that you are really kind of well-versed in this and know what your pitch is, know what your local story is, and then really start with your outreach from that perspective. And then once you've contacted the program director, the best thing to do is to do some follow-up. So the follow-up should be, maybe like a week or so out, and it might be a thank you note for connecting with them. I mean, one of the things that Keith has talked to me about too is one of the worst things you can do is say, when is my PSA playing? Because that can kind of turn them off a little bit. But if you can just say, do you need any additional information? Is there anything else I can help you connect with? I think that they're going to be impressed because a lot of times they're getting national campaigns, but you're calling them from a local level, from your community, and you're talking about something that they're going to care about. So that's really your way in. So the other thing is, I think at this point, I wanted to go back and show you guys a little bit more about what the airing report looks like. Let's see if we can get back here, because this is what we've been getting a lot of questions. Uh-oh, let's see. Okay, let's check this one out. Okay. There we go. Yay! Okay, we'll try this again. Okay, we're going back to the home page, but we're going to go back to the local list, and we are going to look at an airing report. So this is where I'm going to have Keith introduce a little bit about what each area is, just so you can understand it. Okay, let's see. Go back to Alabama. Okay, so Keith, are you able to just kind of go through, I thought what we could do is talk a little bit to them about what the values of we have two values here on the screen. And you can see right here in Alabama, they have received, and they have an NAB value, and they have a squad dollar value. So I'm going to have Keith talk to us a little bit about the differences and tell you guys which one we are using, and then talk a little bit more about some of the other things on the bar above. Keith, are you able to share that information with us?
I'd be happy to. So NAB value is the National Association of Broadcasters. They do a survey, an extensive survey of their stations with detailed documentation on what the station has done towards the public service requirement. The reason the NAB does that is their job is to convince the FCC that broadcasters have enough regulations already and that they're doing a great public service. So inherently they want to be able to both document and supply that information to the Hill, which is basically who directs the FCC. So they make this presentation. I believe the last time they were up there, they documented $11.2 billion worth of public service. So what NAB does, or how we get an NAB dollar value is, they take all the stations that report to them, which, as I said, is very extensive. It's in the neighborhood of 1,000 of their stations actually fill out the whole detail and submit all the appropriate things so they can take it to the Hill. And they then come up with what is the average donated value of every PSA, and we use that dollar value then to extrapolate out based on the number of airings that you have. The reason that we like the NAB is before it goes to the Hill, it goes through a GAO review and gets signed off on that their methodology is appropriate, accurate, and not inflating their values. Squad is a different, SQAD is a different dollar value. It's used by advertising buyers, and it's used to try to give a media buyer a better idea of what a budget needs to be inside of any particular market and which day part is going to get them the most of their targeted audience. So Squad, again, is also an average by market, but it averages all the stations by market by both the market and then the day part. So it's a little bit more refined than NABs, but it's still an average. You're going to find that probably about half of your group is going to find that Squad is slightly higher, and the other half will find that NAB is slightly higher. Over time, they come really close to matching, and that's because they're both working on averages, and they're both based on an extraordinary amount of actual data points. So that's why we're using the NAB dollar value. You have, am I going on to rankings now?
Yes, Keith, if you could just tell everybody a little bit about the rankings button that's up there, what that means, and then follow up a little bit with telling us how often the site is monitoring. And then I guess the third question I had for you is, I've been hearing from a lot of commissions. I wonder how we actually get our lists, our television directors lists, and what do we do if they have like incorrect information in them? So those would be the three questions.
All right. So the first is the ranking button. That will start appearing next month, or actually I think it probably already has appeared for you. That is ranking nationally your PSA versus all the other PSAs in the country. And that is something Nielsen supplies me with. They only tell me the rankings for the PSAs that I'm in charge of, but they do meld together all the other PSAs out there. So it usually averages someplace around 1,500 PSAs every month, and your ranking is going to tell you where you ranked on that list. And it's based strictly on the number of airings the PSA received. So that gives you an idea of your share of voice in terms of the PSA world. The particular site that you're looking at right now on screen is actually updated weekly. And there are other places you can go get more details. On that blue line, there's one called Sigma Report. Sigma is the name that Nielsen has given to the service that does the electronic tracking, the beacon, etc. That's what they call in that service. If you click the Sigma Report, you'd actually get, well, there it is on the bottom, a line item for every airing that is documented in that little overview box. So it'll tell you the date and time, the market, the name of the station, and actually what program it played part of. So it gives you a really good idea of what else is or where your PSA is playing. So that's update. There is a report that does give you audience figures and dollar values. That is actually updated on the 15th of every month. But since we're using the NAB dollar value, yours is the dollar value is updated weekly also. And then how do we determine the addresses? We do roughly 200 PSAs every year, and because of that, we're in constant contact with stations, and we've developed our own list, and we try really hard to keep in touch with stations and keep the names and stuff up to date. I will guarantee you that there will be some that won't be. And on that original homepage, I'm having my staff here put a link for you to click on, and you can just send an email of anything you want to update in terms of the station receiving list, or adding to it, changing a name, whatever information you can find out. We'd be happy to customize this one so it matches who you're talking to.
Great, and we did get one question from the chat feature. Someone was asking, is there a reason the airing report would be blank? And what I found out is that if you are opening this website on the Internet Explorer browser, it does not show up. So please use Chrome or Firefox, and it should open up fine. Thank you, Keith. And then, yeah, I think that's great. At this point, I wanted to talk about the other FAQs. We promised you that we would talk about the match FAQs. I know Chester, when he was out and about, heard a lot of questions from you all about the PSA match questions themselves. So I wanted to show you guys that the FAQs are on this website. So if you have any questions, you can go here. We do have Bonnie here, and I thought, Bonnie, you could maybe talk to everybody a little bit about, how you will be handling the match information, and then maybe go through some of the top lines on this FAQ page.
Sure, absolutely. Well, good afternoon, all. It's Bonnie Janicki in the Office of Grants Management, your grants officer. So one of the questions that did come in over the last couple of weeks was, what do we need to send to OGM to prove that we have the match? And so what we ask you is that you keep your documentation on site, and if we come out and do a site visit, or if there is an audit question, or the OIG is questioning something, then using this FAQ document, this is what we want, we will then ask to see to validate your match. So we don't need you to send us anything now. It would just be in the event that we actually have to come back and validate what you have. What Ann mentioned, for the actual FAQ, it's really kind of basic. It's, what is allowable, and it's the same as any other cost. And then we talk about what type of supporting documentation do you have to keep, because obviously you do have to keep supporting documentation. And we talk about the two different ways which you would earn it. And then the final one is if the request that a PSA is aired on a station may include the value of that airtime. We discussed that one as well. If you have any questions about the match, you can always call your grants officer, and they would be happy to respond. I think the key for all this, and the biggest challenge we've seen in the past related to these costs, are making sure that it's reasonable and necessary. Thanks, Pam.
Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, I think we'll be taking some more questions throughout the webinar, so if you have any additional, just let us know by using the chat feature. I did want to show you guys, tell you guys a little bit of an update on the whole campaign. So it's been a very successful campaign so far. I will show you guys that if you go to the National PSA homepage and we click on the National, we can see that we have received a lot of airtime already. So we are going to go to this. And you can see we are up to $1 million worth of donated ad space. So if we had taken this PSA and bought it as ad space, we would have had to spend $1 million to get as much airtime as we've gotten. So it's very successful, and I feel like our campaign is just really starting. So I expect to see that to continue to grow. So congratulations to those of you who have already been out there doing your outreach and getting such great results. I wanted to also let you know that, just to remind you all, that there's another part of the campaign as well. So simultaneously as these TV PSAs are running, we also did do a digital ad campaign on Google, on Facebook, on Instagram, even on Hulu. So we targeted 18 to 24, and then we also did an older age group too for some AmeriCorps members that we thought were in a little bit of the older demographics. So that has been doing amazingly well. I did want to share with you guys a few stats on our website. So since we started running the campaign, and it is just about to end, it will end at the end of June, we have seen a 162% increase to the portal, to the AmeriCorps portal, which I think is phenomenal. And we have also, another good thing that we can tell that the campaign is actually working is the website that we put, the Join AmeriCorps website. The way that you would track it is through the ad. So that has become, the only, you're getting to it from the ad that you've seen. And we have seen that it is like the second most popular page on the whole website, which is great, and that we have had 200,000 page views, and it's like the second most viewed page for all of National Service. So that's just some really good stats that show you that the website is working. We are driving people to the Join AmeriCorps page. We are driving people to the portal, and I hope you guys are seeing some increase in your applications. The other thing I wanted to share a little bit of information about was that on top of the digital ads, the television, we also did a fun out-of-home campaign. And when I say out-of-home, I'm talking about billboards, coffee sleeves in some of the university bookstores, and actually a few movie theaters are airing our PSA. We didn't have a huge budget for it, but we are running these billboards in Illinois, Michigan, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, Washington, D.C., California, Florida, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. So these are all people in states at either a movie theater or a billboard outlet that have expressed interest that they want to show our ads. So we're still in the process that it takes a little while to sometimes print them and get them posted on billboards, but if you guys have any questions about that or are interested in that, please connect with me and I can give you some more specifics. But I'm going to be very excited to drive and see a billboard with our ad campaign on it one day. And then another question that we've received is how can commissions amplify the campaign? And we do have a great website which we'll share with you after the call, but it has a lot of really good tools for you guys to use to really continue to extend the campaign. So one of the things that I think is really important is that we're all speaking in one voice. We're talking about AmeriCorps together. We're talking about be the greater good together. And so I think having that sort of solid messaging that we're all speaking with is really important. So because of that, we wanted to create for you customizable digital ads. If you had budget and were able to do a digital campaign yourself, you can download these ads and you can put your logos in it, put your information in it. We also had some tips on how to buy digital advertising. Some of you are like, how do I even buy it? So we just wanted to give you just a 101. We have sample social media that really is using Be the Greater Good theme, but allows you to tell the stories of your programs and your members, but is tying it to the national messaging. And there's even a radio script there that we wrote in case somebody, I've had a couple of commissions that said they wanted to record a radio PSA, so we wrote a script that's kind of using the same framework and messaging that we're using in this PSA campaign. So I encourage all of you to take a look at that, and we will share that website with you after the call. And now we're going to open the floor up for some questions. If you have a question, feel free to type it in the chat box. Our first question is, while both dollar values are reasonable calculations based on their various methods, which should we use to calculate the value of the match? The answer to that is we decided we are going to use the MAB value, just because, as Keith mentioned, it goes through GAO for clearance. It's the same number that is reported on the Hill, so we have decided that's the number we want to use. And then I'm skipping over one, but on a related note, also could we get something in writing from CNCS about which amount to use? Some commissions will need documentation from CNCS for an annual single audit. Say that again. Could we get something in writing from CNCS about which amount to use?
So we will put that in the FAQ. That's a great question. Yes, let's add that to the FAQ.
Okay. Another question comes from Maureen. The document formed the media outlet listing when and how many times the PSA was run. This is the report we download from the monitoring site, right? Correct. Correct. Okay. Another question is, hi, what would be the process you follow pre-launching and during the launch of the campaign in the state? Any advice for the pre-launching and launch? Are you guys talking about the outreach? I'm not quite clear. If you're talking about outreach for the PSA, I think that we kind of went through some of those steps, which is really to make sure that you're familiar with the PSA, that you review the tools on the website, and then you really conduct your outreach once you've done that.
I do see that Alex, who asked that, is typing.
Okay,
So we might make them follow up.
Great.
And there are a few other people typing as well, so we're just going to pause for a minute while these people get their questions in. So it looks like Maureen has jumped in here. The report she downloaded from the site has a total dollar value that is different from the NAV. So she took a screenshot of the NAV. Is there a better way to reconcile this?
Keith, are you able to answer that question? Keith, are you still there? So, Maureen, your question was...
Sorry, I had you on mute. I will get Justin to add the NAB dollar value to that screenshot so that when they download it, it will include the NAB value.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Keith.
No problem.
We're just waiting to see if we have any more questions come up.
So Alex got back to us about the original question. The original question was, hi, what would be the process you follow pre-launching and during the launch of the campaign in the state? Any advice for the pre-launching and launch? To answer your question, and yes, the outreach. Any advice? Washington is looking at launching the media content on social media in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, okay, great. So when you look at the website that we're going to share with you after this call, it really has a lot of content templates for you to use. So my advice would be to take a look at that, customize your messaging, and then really plan out sort of like what components of your campaign you want to include. If it's a story of one of your members, obviously you should be showing the PSA online as well. So I would really look at the components that you want to get out and the timing that you want to get out, and then look at the tools that will be on that website to really help you customize it to your messaging as well as using the national messaging. I hope that answers your question.
We had one additional question come in. To Maureen and Melinda's point about the accounting, if you download the report listing the individual values of the PSA runs, it doesn't add up to the NAV or the other value. What value is it?
Keith, are you able to answer that question?
Yeah, that should be the squad value. I'm not sure why it's not adding up for Philip, but the program just adds up that column.
So just to add on to what Keith's saying, we will be adding a feature for the NAB value, so you won't even have to worry about the squad value because the NAB value will be the one that we are going to be using.
And we're just going to take another quick pause, waiting for any additional questions. We'll give it one more minute for any additional questions to come in over the chat feature. All right, one additional question came in from Simone. Some of the airings on our report are out of stations in neighboring states. Can we still count those?
I think if you have done outreach to those stations, that you can definitely count that. Great. Okay, it looks like we have answered all the questions we have online, and I'm just going to turn it over to Chester to just close this out.
Okay, thank you, Ann, and thanks again to everyone for joining today's webinar. We hope that this webinar provided the information that you needed and answered the questions that you have. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to send an email to Ann. Her email address is abensel@cns.gov. Again, abensel@cns.gov. And as Bonnie Janicki mentioned, if you have questions regarding the PSA, the match specifically, those questions can go to your grants officer. One final thought, I did receive a number of questions at the regional trainings regarding whether or not the campaign would sunset. So we're still looking at that, but it is our intent to provide the PSA and allow for the PSA match program to go on into next year. So we can provide follow-up on that, but again, our intent is to allow this the PSA match program to continue on into through the end of next fiscal year. And so with that, I would just like to thank my colleagues who participated in today's call, Melissa Langley from our team in AmeriCorps State National for organizing the call. Also, thank you again to Ann and to Bonnie and to Keith Temple as well. So I hope you all have a great day, and thank you again for participating in today's webinar.